So our next talk is by Sushrat Tharat from Chimek, right here in the hometown boy.
Okay, okay, it's working. So I'm going to talk about my work at the Palin lab regarding the use of convolutional networks to measure object animacy contributions in the brain. The basic debate starts here. So if you show animate stimuli and inanimate stimuli to human subjects, what you find is in the ventral temporal cortex, you have distinct neural representations for these two categories. Now, one of the big questions is what drives this categorization? Is it some visual features? So if you can see, the animate stimuli have object parts like legs or bodies or eyes, which would assist you in distinguishing them from inanimate objects. But it could also be something non-visual, such as agency. So we know that humans think, animals think, cars don't for now. So that could be something which is being used. So that's the main question which we want to address. So how do you address this? One thing which you could do is you create a stimulus set where you can shape match the stimuli so that you don't have any category information. You cannot infer any category information through visual features. And then you try to see if any category information is reflected in the brain. If it is, then the brain is using some sort of extra visual coding. That is what was done in Proclova 2016. They have a stimulus set of 16 objects which were shape matched. So you have the snake and you have the rope, which look similar but are from two different categories. To assess the visual similarity of these objects, an oddball detection task was used. So you have 15 distractors and one object, and the task is to detect that oddball. The longer you take, the more similar these two objects are. So you can then create pairwise similarity measures for each of the 16 objects, and then project them into a two-dimensional space. So you get the two principal components. And what you find is there's no animacy reflected in these two dimensions, which says that, okay, this stimulus set is actually working, that it's not easy to infer category from the stimulus set. Now, what they did is they ran a searchlight analysis using the visual dissimilarity matrix, which we got from the oddball task, and the category dissimilarity matrix, which just says the element, correlation, the pairwise distance is 1 if they are from two different categories, as it regresses onto the neural dissimilarity matrix in each searchlight. Now, if the regression weight for the category dissimilarity matrix is significantly non-zero, we can say that that particular searchlight is encoding extravisual animacy. And what they found is they found this cluster in the ventral visual cortex, which we now call the extravisual animacy cluster, in which you can decode the animacy for these 16 shape match stimuli. So this raised a question as to, is animacy being reflected in this region without the use of visual features? And that's something which we would like to explore in our work. So as you can also see, if we run a support vector machine on top of this ROI, you find that the animacy organization drops out, and the classification accuracy is pretty high. And this is cross task. So we are training on localizers, and we are testing on the main experiment, which uses the 16 stimuli. So this region is actually encoding animacy. So to understand if the oddball task is actually capturing all visual features, we needed to go one step ahead. We needed to go to algorithms which could capture very rich visual features, and that is where we brought in the convolutional neural networks, of course. And so the networks we are using are designed for object categorization. So they are trained on 1,000 object categories on 1 million images. And what they do is they can identify that as an owl. So if you input the owl as an image, then you pass it through this convolutional neural network, which is a feed-forward system. And then at the end, you get the semantic label owl. So you can deconvolve these networks and try to figure out what kind of visual features have been represented. So in the first layers, you have features like edges and blobs, like Gabor filters. As you proceed through the CNN, you get mid-level features like textures, and then in the end layers, you go to object parts. So you have this really nice hierarchical processing going on in the convolutional neural network. And we would like to use these features now instead of the features we obtained from the oddball task to reassess the problem. So another thing of mention is we are not using AlexNet, which is the neural network which is used in most research nowadays. We are using VGG16, which is a deeper convolutional network which has 16 layers. Also, all the representations in the convolutional network are visual in nature. They are not trained on any sort of semantics, in the sense that they don't know that a cat is similar to a, like it's more similar to a dog than a cat is to a car. They don't know that. They just think of everything as distinct objects. So whatever drops out of these networks is purely visual. So we can just use all the features out of the box. Now what we do is we need to understand if these networks can actually classify those 16 shape match stimuli at all. Because now what we saw is you can't do that using the oddball task. But can these visual features help you classify those 16 shape match stimuli? So we train each layer of the CNN using 72 images, which are different from the 16 shape match stimuli. We train a support vector machine, so you have this animacy boundary, and then you test on the 16 shape match stimuli. And the distance from the hyperplane, the decision hyperplane, to each of the stimuli is the SVM decision score, which I'll refer to in further slides. And the orthogonal dimension is the animacy dimension. So we train support vector machines on each of the CNN layers. So I'm showing the results here. What I'm showing are the rank orders of the SVM decision scores, so that it's simple to understand. So in the low-level layers, you don't really have high accuracy, of course, because they are encoding low-level features. But then as you proceed into mid layers, you kind of see better accuracy. So it's like 63%, but not really high. But in the final layers, you do get full-blown classification. So the accuracy in FC7, which is like one of the fully connected layers, is 88%, which is comparable to what we find in the extra visual animacy cluster. So, okay, that's cool. We can use visual features to actually classify these 16 shape match stimuli. But does the animacy organization reflected in convolutional networks actually match the animacy organization reflected in the extra visual animacy cortex? Because if it does, then we can make a stronger claim that, okay, the visual features actually can be used to create the animacy organization and not just distinguish between animate and inanimate stimuli. So we then compare the animacy organization between each layer of the CNN and from the extra visual animacy cortex cluster. So as you go deeper into the CNN, what we see here is the correlations between the animacy organizations increase and they become extremely high. They don't hit noise ceiling in any layer, but that's something we can discuss later. So here we visualize one of the layers which has the maximum correlation, and we find that the stimuli line up very well. So on the x-axis are the extra visual and cluster decision scores, and on the y-axis are the CNN decision scores. But we do find some differences which might have some structure to them. We don't know if they do yet. So the rope is misclassified as animate by the CNNs, while the plane is misclassified as animate by the extra visual animacy cluster. There might be structure to these differences which might hint at an extra visual animacy encoding, but that would require an explicit dissociation with CNN visual features in further work. So yeah, the conclusions we can make from this work is that the animacy organization for shape matched objects in the ventral temporal cortex can be explained to a large extent by visual features. That does not imply that visual features are being used to encode this distinction, but who knows. Yeah, and the CNN visual features capture visual information beyond the behavioral measures. As we saw, like in the oddball task, you can't classify animacy, but in CNNs you can. And any further analysis where people want to make claims about extra visual encoding should try to explicitly decode the visual features obtained from CNNs from the factor of interest. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Alfonso.
Yeah.
Here, front.
Sorry.
Mr. Reliable.
I think very nice presentation. Can you go back one slide? No, the conclusion slide.
Oh, the conclusions.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
You say the animacy organization can be driven by visual features. What else? Is there an alternative hypothesis?
That it's driven by non-visual features. That's like agency, alternate. No, so the previous study made the conclusion, like the previous study concluded that you have extra visual animacy encoding. So this is a what-if study. If the oddball tasks actually show that, okay, there is extra visual animacy encoding, that conclusion should also hold if I use much more richer visual features. And it seems it does not to some extent. So that was the main point, but we can go further, much further, and just say that, okay, it's also majorly driven by visual features. I don't know.
The reason I ask my question is because there's been some rather confused claims about the organization of this part of the brain being driven by semantic properties.
Right.
And so I was wondering if that's what you meant. But if they are semantic properties, then how are those arrived at, if not through the visual stimulus that you present to the subjects? So, so I was curious whether in the back of your mind you were sort of leading us to say, well, it's visual and it's not semantic. I never thought that was a real hypothesis.
Well, even if we say that it's something non-visual, the problem is so these CNNs were not trained using any sort of semantics. But you can think about this in this way. If you have some non-visual information coming into this cluster, and if you have learning going on, your CNN or the network, the ventral stream, might get trained in such a way that you can extract those semantic features using purely visual features at some point. So it's like a chicken and egg problem, I don't know. So you have this feed-forward system first, which can give you some stuff, then you can infer some other properties using a top-down and I don't know, processing. But then again, you can train your system to just do it feed-forward. I don't know how it works.
More questions? Oh yes, one over here.
Hello. Yeah, I was just, so everything here is about static things in the world, but basically one fundamental property of animate things is that they have self-generated motion or internally generated force that allows them to suddenly start moving when they aren't initially, right? And that's, babies pick up on this kind of animacy, it seems very early, and I don't know if they pick up on what objects look like that are animate versus inanimate early. So do you have thoughts on, like, why are we looking at animacy when for static objects in the world and not the way that something moves in the world?
Okay. Well, you can also assign animacy to non-moving objects. Like you can also assign animacy to just snapshots of things, right? I agree that animacy is more, even to me, a dynamic property. But well, in that sort of analysis, I think you have to involve the dorsal stream too, because you're doing motion processing, but then you have to represent it at some place. So the claim is not that you don't have any non-visual encoding. It's more like using these stimuli, you don't need non-visual encoding. But you might as well, yes, have some motion-related properties there, but we can't anyway use, like, we can't capitalize on those features using static stimuli. Does that answer it? No.
All right, well, thank you very much.